have a dissenting voice. But first and foremost, there's Aaron, who says, it seems like OpenAI CFO Sarah Fryer finally said what we've all been thinking. The money for the $1 trillion+ of deals that OpenAI has promised is simply not there. It seems our largest, most successful companies are now content to openly ask the U.S. taxpayer to subsidize their risk. There certainly exists an argument for public assistance of certain parts of the AI stack, particularly power, but are we really already at the point in the bubble where we're asking for bailouts? Most would agree that when the bubble eventually pops, NVIDIA and OpenAI are poised to experience some of the largest falls from grace. With the amount of hubris shown from both companies, I wonder which one will deserve it more. So, Ben, a lot of different directions we could go here, but I'll just repeat Aaron's question. Are we already at the point in the bubble where we're asking for bailouts? What do you think?
No, I think that that is a mischaracterization of what was discussed here, which is not to excuse the overall request, which is a little bit of saying the quiet part out loud. So, again, Sarah Fryer, the CFO, was out with some sort of clarification. Oh, I didn't know what that word meant, blah, blah, blah. We're not looking for federal support.
Yeah.
What I believe she was referring to is about financing. So we discussed this in the context of NVIDIA, or I wrote about it in the context of NVIDIA. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast with some of the deals they've done with other companies. Like some of the neo clouds, they've like guaranteed to buy a certain amount of capacity through X number of years. And the goal from NVIDIA in that case is not to actually buy that capacity.
Right.
The goal is to allow the neo cloud to get a lower rate of financing to buy NVIDIA chips, with the assumption that NeoCloud is going to rent those chips to someone else. But the risk that a financier would have, well, what if you don't find customers? If you don't find customers, you're going to go bankrupt and we're going to lose all our money. NVIDIA is saying, no, they have a guaranteed customer, which is us. We will rent the capacity if no one else rents it.
Yeah.
And that should allow the NeoCloud to have a lower interest rate on their financing because they have a guaranteed source of revenue. I think that's what she was referring to. This is what I say this week, and I wrote on Shashekari, obviously we're in a bubble. The marker of shifting into a bubble is when debt starts entering the equation. So, and obviously all these deals, to the extent they happen, we're getting too big for traditional VC. It's not going to just be equity. There's going to be debt. And debt is the idea you're getting capacity. Debt is a very good match, at least in theory, with sort of upfront infrastructure investments that pay off over time, because you need to build it, and then you have the low marginal cost of serving it in the long run, and you can pay off your debt sort of going forward. The reason why VC companies don't take on debt is because the uncertainty is very, very high. So their interest rates would be sky high. It would consume other free cash flow. So they give away equity, which is, they don't have to they don't have to pay interest. They don't have to pay it back, but they do lose part of the upside. They have to share the upside in the long run. That's just sort of the fundamental difference between debt and equity. In theory, once you're established and you have predictable cash flows, debt is better because you're not giving away your upside. All you're doing is debt is a way to shift time. You're paying for the stuff now with revenue that you're going to earn in the future by virtue of buying the stuff now. The issue is, if you're going to take on a bunch of debt, the interest rate really matters. And so what I suspect this reference was OpenAI would love if there was an understanding by whoever is issuing debt to them that no matter what, the U.S. government is going to be good for it, because
these loans.
That's right. I mean, and it was part of a discussion of banks and government. I think obviously it was an error to say this. It was an error, even if you wanted to say it, to not clarify what you were talking about, which is financing.
That's the thing. Yeah. I feel for Sarah Fryer, because the word backstop conjures the federal government bailing out big banks or something like that, which is
Well,
not
but
really what she was
I
describing.
don't feel too much sympathy to her, because what she was doing, I think, and I sort of said this line before, was saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. Well, some kind of
OpenAI
public-private partnership does feel inevitable somewhere along the line here.
Well, what OpenAI, I think, is doing with cutting all these deals with anyone and everyone is they're sort of tying everyone into their web so that no one can afford for OpenAI to not succeed.
Right.
And
there's a systemic risk if OpenAI goes
right.
belly
They're
up.
trying to make themselves a systemic risk, and thus have guaranteed.
Makes a lot of sense for the U.S.
right.
government to come in and guarantee loans. Yeah.
Right. And so, well, not, I mean, so I'm sure they've talked about this internally. Like, if we make a deal with Oracle, we make a deal with Microsoft, we make a deal with Google, we make a deal with Amazon, and all the, like, if we become so essential that, yeah, we're taking these crazy risks, but it's in everyone's interest that we succeed. It goes back to that story where if you owe the bank $1,000, the bank owns you. Small, but if you owe the bank $1 million, you owe the bank. I think that phrase originated at a time when $1,000 and $1 million were more meaningful.
Now it's 10 million and $1 trillion.
Right.
And OpenAI may in fact owe $1 trillion somewhere.
Right.
Along
That's
the line
my
here.
overall read on what they're doing, just to the system as a whole. And you know, and so obviously implicit in that is once you get too big to fail, it is valid to draw the line back to banks. So I feel bad for her in that she shouldn't have said the quiet part out loud, and it sucks. I don't feel
and there's
bad.
a way to use less loaded terminology that doesn't turn this into like a national news story this week. That's where I feel bad.
Maybe it should be a national news story, because what they are doing is like we are all getting signed up for this, whether we know it or not. So it was one of those, it's definitely an error. I can feel bad for anyone making an error, but in my position as an analyst, I'm not going to say, oh, she misspoke, that's not what she meant. I think that's exactly what she meant.
Yeah.
and so, but again, it's not a bailout. Like, what's the line? What's the difference? What I think it's driving for is they want cheaper financing. The best way to get cheaper financing is to basically have the U.S. government as a backstop. Like that's literally.
I mean, let's ask a more fundamental question, because I found it interesting, as more evidence that paying for the compute necessary to serve AI to massive audiences may be impossible if you don't already have monopoly profits to fund what you're doing. And that's been a question with OpenAI all along. But then on the other hand, I understand why people would recoil at this idea, but if you accept the premise that leading edge AI is essential to national security over the next several decades, which is definitely debatable, but developing leading edge AI may only be possible while serving a massive consumer business. And in that scenario, I don't think it's that crazy to have the government de-risk some of the lending in order to advance the future of the ecosystem. Do you?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Okay.
Where do you draw the line? Oh, this one just happens to be so expensive that it sort of has to be done. If OpenAI achieves what they want to achieve, then this sort of discussion came in the context of Sarah Fryer saying that, an IPO is not coming soon. If you want
it's a
massive amounts of funding, do an IPO and issue a bunch of stock. And make your case to shareholders about what they're buying into, and what, that comes with certain responsibilities. That comes with a decrease in equity, because you're actually literally selling equity. All these reporting requirements. If you're going to be so systematically important, then I think you should be a public company. And you should have the transparency that goes with it. So I actually think the context of these comments makes it worse.
She said specifically an IPO.
I'm going to double down.
I
completely disagree with you. I don't feel bad for her. It was dumb, but I appreciate her saying the quiet part out loud, and I think it's useful for all of us to be aware of what the implications of what they're what OpenAI is doing are.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. I look at it and say, all right, well, a
You're a
logical
softie.
extension.
You're the guy
First of
who
all, I
when
am
Rudy Gobert
sympathetic to any
was like
underdog
touching all the
anywhere.
mics, and then he got
Yeah.
COVID first. Which, by the way, was in retrospect a very appropriate. I would,
I was
everyone
right.
was going to get COVID
years
anyway.
ago. Yeah.
But yes, you are a well-known softie for
Anyone who's on
long-time
the
Andrew
wrong
Sharp
end
aficionados.
of an internet pileup, I tend to be sympathetic, or pile on, that is. And yeah, we'll see what happens in terms of government involvement with OpenAI, but all part of the bubbly atmosphere we inhabit here. One question I had on the rundown: what's the more appropriate top of the AI bubble? Sam Altman getting indignant when he was asked how OpenAI's $13 billion in revenue can support $1.4 trillion of spending commitments, or President Trump saying last week, everybody wants AI because it's the new internet. It's the new everything. It's one of the biggest things anyone's ever seen. So everyone wants it. Yeah. I mean, the only problem is if you don't get it. Which of those do you think is the more appropriate epigraph on the bubble here?
I don't think we're anywhere close to the top of the bubble, so I think
Okay.
neither are relevant. The popping of the bubble is probably going to come when, if you just follow sort of traditional, like there's the so-called like trough of disillusionment or whatever, where something is hyped and everyone's getting on board with it, and then everyone's like, oh, this doesn't work, it sucks, and then the bottom falls out, and then actually what happens is it just wasn't ready. It has to be developed, and it gets better, and so you look up and holy cow, we've actually vastly exceeded what we thought we were going to get sort of before. It's certainly, if there were some sort of just like Microsoft reports like a huge miss, because actually turns out all these companies that sign up for Copilot all bailed and cut it. Yeah, or something like that. The reality is all these companies, actually, this is something I'm very curious about. All these companies are saying demand vastly exceeds supply.
Yep.
That's why we're justified in increasing our capex, because we can't fulfill the needs. Again, I've been a big defender, I think, of Google in particular, where I have to take where I was right about Google points when I can grab them, but because times I've been wrong. But in January of this year, their stock had a big drop because of they were announcing big capex increases, and I think the cloud numbers were a little disappointing. And I'm like, actually, if you look at the cloud numbers, it's super clear they just don't have enough capacity. So that's number one, why they missed, and number two, why you should not just be happy they're spending more, you should wish they had spent more previously. And that has very much come to bear. You could tell they brought a lot of capacity on this year. Huge jumps in Google Cloud, margins jumps and revenue jumps. It's all looking fantastic. And and that by and large seems to be the case. What's confusing is OpenAI signs a deal with AWS, a relatively small deal, $38 billion. But the difference is that like a $300 billion with Oracle, that's for in the future, for data centers that actually still need to be built. This $38 billion for Amazon is for access to GPUs right now. Why does Amazon have GPUs to give OpenAI right now if they're telling investors on earnings calls that demand far exceeds supply? Yeah. It's a little
theories?
Weird. Well, so I think the theory is, it's interesting. We've seen a real shift in talking about power on these calls, which everyone's been talking about. And actually, both Microsoft and Amazon said, actually, no, we have plenty of chips. We've been power constrained, which they haven't said that as sort of so clearly previously. And
we knew this was coming. We didn't know it was happening today.
I think AWS probably, they talk about, we just brought on a new data center. We're about to bring on X amount of power. And they let OpenAI jump the line because it's a huge boost for them.
The stock. Yep.
That's right. We have OpenAI. So I think, and OpenAI is paying actually a pretty steep price for these GPUs. So
which is indicative of OpenAI needing chips now, as opposed to waiting for Oracle.
Because the sort of pessimistic take is, OpenAI is gangbusters and no one else is. Actually, this is really just an OpenAI story. So I mean, I think so. There is an open question here. I think the story I told about letting them jump the line is probably the case. I don't think they've had GPUs just sitting there unused
Yeah.
and OpenAI's take them. I think they probably literally just brought capacity online that should have gone to people in line, and they let OpenAI sort of cut the line because OpenAI is paying more, and Amazon stock goes up 10% when they sign the deal.
Exactly. The now routine OpenAI press release bump.
It's pretty wild.
Congrats to the folks at Amazon. Did you have any
but
takes?
in this case, it is important to note, I think what makes this distinct, it's not just a press release bump. It's OpenAI is going to be running on Amazon servers like immediately. So, which makes this deal, and I suspect that's what happened with Google as well, where no one's announced the details of what's going on with NVIDIA and Google. They did sign a deal. It is for NVIDIA GPUs. It's not for TPUs. But I think that's we need capacity now. Like, we're bursting at the seams. And, that is the OpenAI bull case, is like everyone's falling over backwards to give them supply, and they still don't have enough supply.
And they need it. Yeah. No, exactly. Well, as far as the OpenAI bull case, did you have any response to the Sam Altman answer to Brad Gerstner over the weekend? The indignant response?
I don't know. I did not actually watch it. I guess I probably should watch it.
Wow, that's great. Good job touching grass. It went viral for a couple days there, but you missed it. I like it.
Yeah. I don't know.
My take is
kind
specifically. I have a take. Sam's answer was fine. The problem with his answer was his tone, because the questions about OpenAI's spending commitments are obviously fair, and he can acknowledge the questions are fair and then just make his case. Speaking as a podcast host myself, Gerstner was just being a good host and teeing up a softball for Sam Altman to address. And then he addressed it in kind of a annoyed way that I think rankled a lot of people. But I think the questions are fair, and Sam's answers are also fair. Like, it's the same case he made to you in the Stratechery interview a couple weeks ago. They're spending because they are betting that they're going to need the compute, and the bigger risk is that they don't have the compute once the market opportunity materializes, which is
from OpenAI's perspective. They are operating still, even though a very large company with a ton of revenue, as a startup, and I think appropriately so. This kind of goes back to your point before. This is an all-in bet by them that they could stop now and have a nice business, but what's the fun in that? Right? Like, they're going to they want to be the AI for the world, and I thought that's what we celebrated, the sort of audaciousness, going for the moon, not being content to hit a streetlight. And this is maybe a bit of having, Altman's background is in startups. This is something that Google or Microsoft or all these big companies, even a Meta, they do have constraints that a company like OpenAI doesn't. And maybe this is the defense to why they don't want to go public. They don't want to answer to shareholders. They want to spin these tails and get these,
and they are losing a lot of money right now. Despite all the success, they're losing a lot of money every quarter, and so they need to expand in order to pay to serve.
The reason it'd be
customers.
Fascinating to see the public is to get visibility on, are they losing money on actual servicing? Is the yes, they're spending a lot of money on R&D and things of that nature, but when you actually calculate the sort of cost of serving their customers relative to what they're making for the customers, what are the profit margins there? That's the real question. And because you can always, given their growth rate, assuming that they are profitable on a unit cost basis, where they're making X amount of money on on their customers, that's like, I have no objection to how much money they're losing. But we don't know that, right? Like the $20 a month plan was pulled out of thin air. Are they actually making money on those $20 a month plans or not?
Yes. Well, maybe one day we'll get an OpenAI IPO, which I'm cheering for strictly for the sake of takes here on the
Oh yeah,
podcast.
I mean, public companies are much better for me. This
Open
whole
up the
shift to private
books.
is
Let's have some fun. Indeed. All right. Well, you